Welcome to Ground Control. I have the Gyro RTF Pioneer 620mm Wingspan Brushless Micro sub 250 gram bush plane. Look at these rough terrain tires. Boy, that's going to help me out where I have to land. Alright, so I want to give you some specs on this, and I know you guys, several of you have posted, and you're like me, you know, you want to find a microplane that's brushless. You're tired of the brushed motor and gearbox planes, and I fully understand that. So I went out looking for a bush plane that had approximately a 24-inch wingspan, that was sub 250 grams, that had a decent brushless power system in it. I compared 3 different micro bush planes, and I decided to go ahead and pull the trigger on the Gyro's Pioneer because it had, I think, the best spec'd brushless power system. So let me give you some of the specs here. I weighed the airframe without the battery, and it comes completely assembled. Even the landing gear were already attached. The only thing you have to do is charge the battery, put 4 AA's in the transmitter, and you're ready to go out and fly. So the airframe without the battery weighs 92.4 grams. It comes with one 2S 350 milliamp hour 20C LiPo. So if the 20C rating is correct, that LiPo should be able to supply a constant 7 amps of power. The battery weighs 20.5 grams, which brings the all-up weight to 112.9 grams, 113 grams all-up weight on a little 2S LiPo. That is pretty lightweight. It's made out of EPP foam. You know I love EPP foam. That is the most durable foam I have come across so far, which is another reason that I chose this plane. It should be very durable. This is being marketed as a beginner plane. Okay, so the specified CG on this plane is 35 millimeters back from the root cord of the wing, and I put taken a Sharpie and put a couple black dots right at 35 millimeters back from the leading edge of the wing. Now, after flying their T-33 EDF jet and going by the setup that was in the manual, I double checked the specified CG on this plane from the manual. So the root cord of the wing is approximately 107 millimeters. 35 millimeters of that is 32.7% of the root cord. So I think the specified CG is where it should be. I did take the spinner and the prop off of the plane to see what kind of prop shaft it had, because you have a Phillips screw head that goes in and basically ties the prop onto the shaft using the spinner. So I took that off and measured the diameter of the shaft. The shaft is a 4 millimeter shaft. So if you've got a 1 millimeter spacer, and if I have to, I will fabricate a 1 millimeter spacer so that I can use a standard 5 millimeter hub ABS prop on this plane. I think that the spare prop for this, which is a 5 by 2.75 two-blade prop, is like $4. Well, I'm not spending $4 on an ABS prop. So I will fabricate a 1 millimeter spacer if I have to, so I can use just one of my standard ABS props on there. I checked the control surfaces. They do have recommended control surface movement for low rate and high rate. My ailerons are moving at 9 millimeters up and down, 9 millimeters each direction. The elevator is moving 8 millimeters in each direction, and the rudder is moving 12 millimeters in each direction. It looks like a pretty good starting point to me. I was thinking about softening up the elevator because almost every one of these factory microplanes I've ever flown had a real twitchy elevator. But the control rod on the control horn on the elevator is already at the bottom hole. I don't know where it's connected to the servo because I can't see it, you know, from the battery bay. So we'll just have to put it in the air and see whether that's going to be twitchy or not. It has a wingspan of 620 millimeters, which comes out to 24.4 inches. It has a length of 416 millimeters, which is 16.4 inches. They say the flying weight is around 105 grams. Well, after I weighed it, I gave you that number already. After I weighed it with the battery, the stock battery in it, it's 113 grams. So they're a little bit off, 8 grams off on that. The power system is listed as a 1608 3000 kV motor. Now I was really surprised when I read the specs on this and it said it had a 1608 motor. That's a pretty good sized motor for this size plane. What I don't know, and I will have to figure that out. What I don't know is when they got 16 millimeters on that measurement, did they measure the stators of the motor, or did they measure the outside of the bell housing? That I don't know. So is it actually a 1608 motor, or is it more like a 1208? I don't know. I can't answer that, but I will try and find that out. It has 2 servos, well, 1 servo for the elevator and the rudder. Those are 1.9 gram servos. I assume they're analog because they don't list them as digital. Normally, if they're digital, they will list it as digital. So I'm guessing those are analog. And 1 3.7 gram servo for the ailerons. Let me see, it has ailerons, elevator, rudder, no flaps. That's one of the things that it didn't have that I was a little disappointed in. I was looking at a couple of other planes that are basically in the same class as this plane, and both of those planes did come with flaps. But this one looked like it had a little beefier power system, and this one was made out of EPP foam. So I decided to go with this one. Comes fully assembled, as I said. Now, my notes, there are a couple things I was disappointed in. And the transmitter that it comes with, it's better than a toy grade transmitter, I will say that. It's not a bad little transmitter. It's definitely not a hobby grade transmitter, but it is definitely a step up from those toy transmitters that you typically get with your ready to fly planes. It only has 1 switch on it. When the switch is all the way forward, you're in stabilization mode, which is what they refer to it as. I'll refer to it as 6G mode, beginner mode, safe mode, or emergency mode. Okay, so that limits the angle on the roll and the pitch axis and self-levels the plane. It's just a 2-position switch. You pull the switch forward and you're in dynamic mode. And in a dynamic mode, the gyro stabilizes the plane against things like wind and wind gust, but it doesn't limit your angle, and it shouldn't interfere with the controls while you're flying it. So you should have full control of the plane, but it will counteract things like wind gust. It does have, you know, your on and off button is right here. This is a Mode 2 transmitter. Throttle and rudder on the left, aileron elevator on the right. Mine came pre-bound. I would assume that most of them come pre-bound. But in order to bind it up to the plane, you've got 2 little black buttons here. So if you power on the transmitter, hold those 2 buttons in, it'll put the transmitter into bind mode, just in case yours comes and is not pre-bound. The one thing that's lacking on this transmitter that I would have liked to have seen, because it's molded plastic, right? Mold a little loop in there for a lanyard on your transmitter. I mean, most of the toy transmitters I have a lanyard loop molded into them. So I think they could have molded a lanyard loop on the front of the transmitter, so you're not having to hold it. You can hang it off of your lanyard. That's what I like to do. So I'm kind of disappointed that it didn't have that. It does come with everything except for the 4 AA batteries that you need for the transmitter. The transmitter will beep every minute. Now, I thought when I read in the manual that meant that it would start beeping once I was activating the throttle, but that does not appear to be the case, because when I was bound up to it and I was testing different things, the transmitter kept beeping even though there was no throttle active on it. So it seems to beep every minute, as long as it beeps every minute for as long, I think, as the transmitter is turned on. So that's not really helpful if you're trying to use that as a flight timer. So I will definitely have a separate flight timer, you know, to use to tell me how long I've had the plane in the air. It didn't say anything about manual calibration of the gyro, but typically you would pull the sticks down and out for more than 3 seconds to recalibrate the gyro. I didn't read anything about that, so maybe the only way to recalibrate the gyro is to power cycle it. But you want to turn on your transmitter first and then power up your plane. And there are a couple of tips I'll give you on this before we go out and do the maiden launch on it. But the landing gear fit really loose. So what I did was, you know, you've got this little gap here where the wire insert is into the plastic. And so I just put my hot glue gun on low temperature and just shot a bead inside that gap, and then put a little bridge across the landing gear wires where they come up and attach to the struts here, and that seems pretty solid. I'm not gonna lose my landing gear, so you might want to do that because I do fit pretty loose. Also, I made sure, because you never know if they do everything at the factory that they should be doing. So, you know, I powered up my transmitter, I put my throttle stick all the way up, I connected the battery to the ESC, the receiver board, and waited for the 2 beeps, and then I pushed it all the way down, and then the ESC initialized. So now I know that my ESC is programmed for the top end and bottom end of the throttle. So you might want to do that just to be on the safe side, to make sure that you're getting full range on your throttle stick like you should. Okay, so I did go ahead and charge up the battery, and I did go ahead and run it up at full power with a load meter on it. So the motor looks like it's pretty torquey for the size of the prop that it's spinning. And let me see here, here it is. Okay, so the amp draw at 100% throttle with a fully charged stock LiPo was 4.2 amps, and at 50% throttle it was 2.1 amps. Now, I don't know how much thrust that is producing, but that is the amp draw at 100% throttle and 50% throttle, so that's pretty good, you know, for a 3000 kV motor spinning a 5x2.75 prop on the 1608 motor, if it in fact is a 1608. But regardless, it definitely has, if it's only pulling that many amps at full throttle, it definitely has enough torque to spin that prop pretty fast. So I think it's going to have a very good amount of power. Okay. The other thing, when I throttled it up the first time, full throttle, before I put the load meter on it, I had a lot of vibration coming from the motor and the prop. So I cut a piece of painter's tape, and I got really, really lucky. This has never happened before. I cut a strip of painter's tape, and I put it on the prop, not knowing which prop blade was going to be light and which was going to be heavy, and not knowing how far I was going to need to move that painter's tape in or out on the light blade. So I just stuck it on there and then put it back up at full throttle, and it was just butter smooth. That has never happened before. So if you test that out, make sure you test that out, and if there's any vibration, you know, you're just going to have to play around with it a little bit. First put some tape on and find out, you know, if that's the light blade. If it's not, take the tape off, move it to the other blade, and then move it up and down until you get it completely smooth. You don't want any vibration in your power system. It'll rob you of power, it'll pull more amps, and it'll vibrate the heck out of that motor. So do that before you do anything else. But anyway, we will go out and throw this into the wind, see how it performs. I'm sure it's going to be a very fun little plane, but let's just go out and see if it'll do everything that we want it to. I'll see you out at the field. It is maiden launch time of the Gyro RTF Pioneer 620mm Wingspan brushless micro bush plane. Check our control surfaces.
everything looks good. I have got it in safe mode, and that's my transmitter. It's going to beep every minute to let me know 1 minute has elapsed since I have bound up to the plane. I have a separate timer. I've got my flight timer set for 5 minutes. I figure 60% throttle will probably be a good throttle range, so I'm going to turn on my timer. Okay, and safe mode, stabilization mode, emergency mode, beginner mode, whatever the terminology of the day is. Let's give it 60% throttle and launch it. Ooh. Ooh. Slow it down a little bit. Whee! Okay, so okay, let's come back through here. Let's come back through here. Oh, there goes another minute. And see, okay, so that is full left stick. That is full right stick with just the aileron, so it's not all that restrictive in beginner mode. Now let's put a little rudder into it. You can fly this in a very small area, guys. Let me just slow her down a little bit. Look at that. It feels like it has a lot of power. I wanted to put it in safe mode just to see, you know, on launch, and see how small of a space I could fly it in. And man, in safe mode, you can fly this in a very small area. Check that out. Wow, that is tight turns with just, there goes another minute, with just a little bit of rudder. Awesome. It does have a lot of power to it. So let's gain a little altitude, because I don't know how well this is trimmed, you know, from the factory. Gain a little altitude and put it into dynamic mode, which is, ooh, yeah, wanting to dive down on me a little bit. Okay, so we're in dynamic mode now. Ooh, it's got nice amount of power. Nice amount of power. Let me slow it down a little bit. Check that out. Now slow it down again. Gotta remember to get out of the throttle on this. Yeah. Oh, another minute has elapsed. Okay, so let's see something else here. Oh man, that is a lethargic roll. I wondered about those ailerons being so far inbound on the wing, what kind of roll rate it was going to have, and that is really lethargic, but it is being touted as a beginner plane, so I think that the reason that they put those ailerons inbound like that was so that they wouldn't be twitchy with this little transmitter. That would be my guess. The elevator and the rudder don't feel too bad. The aileron is definitely not twitchy. The controls are more abrupt than what you would have on a hobby grade transmitter, but this transmitter is a huge step above those toy transmitters that typically come with these ready to fly planes. Check that out. Loops are not a problem with this plane. Okay, so let's try something else with it. Oh, did you see that stall turn? It definitely has plenty of rudder. I like that. I like having lots of rudder. So I'm curious to see what this battery is going to be like. Check that out. Man, that really spins the tail around doing stall turns. Okay, so one thing I'm curious about, and let's gain some altitude. come back through here, and I want to see what the stall looks like, and I will have my finger on the switch for safe mode. Okay, so reducing throttle, pulling back on the stick, reducing throttle, and look at that. That's awesome, guys. It looks like the stalls on this are going to be a non-issue. All it did was lower its nose a little bit and go on, and I had the stick at one point already. It's been 5 minutes. Wow, that was a quick 5 minutes. But I was pulling almost all the way back on the elevator stick at that point, and it still didn't drop a wing on me. So let's go ahead and put it back in safe mode, and then we'll bring it over here on the lane and see if we can land it. But I'm pretty impressed with this little plane so far. Okay, I'm going to power it off. I'm just gliding in. A little bit of a bounce on those big tires. Oh, rolled into the ditch. Okay, so was that 5 minutes? Yeah, I guess so. That was a 5-minute flight. Okay, so let's bring it back up here. That's a cool little plane. It definitely has plenty of power, and it looks like the stalls, a normal stall, is going to be a non-issue with this plane. Let me get a hold of it here. But yeah, it just kind of lowered its nose and went on it, and dynamic mode, and it didn't even drop a wing at all. So I'm pretty impressed with the stall characteristics of this plane. Pretty fun. Okay, so let me pull out my battery meter here and see what kind of voltage we have left in the pack after that 5-minute flight. I'm going to turn the transmitter off. I don't care for that beeping, that's for sure. Okay, so let's see here. I'll see if I can hold this up so you guys can see it. It's a little tiny light though. Okay, so 7.94, almost 7.6. That's 3.7, 3.8. Just right at, just under. One sells at 3.8, one is at 3.795. So, and I wasn't easy in the throttle. So, even with this little tiny, let me hold it up here. This little tiny 350 milliamp hour 2S LiPo, it's only a 20C. I would say you're probably going to get close to, if you're flying it like I was flying it, I would say you're probably going to get 7 to 8 minutes of flight out of it. If you're just cruising around, at about half throttle, 60% throttle, you're going to get a tremendous amount of flight time from this brushless power system. And this is one of the reasons that I decided on this one, is when I saw that they put a 1608 motor in it, I knew that thing was going to have some torque to spin that 5x2.75 prop. So that is absolutely awesome. All right, so I'll meet you back at the hangar, and I'll give you my opinion on this little brushless micro bush plane so far after the maiden flight. You saw that when I released it, it did dip down on me a little bit, so it looks like I need a little upward trim on the elevator. The ailerons felt good. I didn't seem to be drifting left or right. It didn't seem to be slewing left or right, so it looks like the rudder is in a pretty good position. But the elevator, even when I switched it into dynamic mode, where the gyro wouldn't interfere with it except for wind, it did want to nose down on me. So I need to make an adjustment on the elevator and put another flight on it. But I will see you back at the hangar.
Okay, so what did you guys think of this little flight demonstration of this plane? So far, I am pretty impressed with it. Okay, so when I first launched it, and the first couple of minutes I was flying it, it took me a couple of minutes to get used to the transmitter. The transmitter, it's a different form factor than what I'm used to flying with, the TX16S. It's not because it's a bad transmitter. It's, like I said, this is the nicest ready-to-fly transmitter I've seen of any of the ready-to-fly planes I've ever gotten. But you know, I have several hobby-grade transmitters, and every one of them have a little different feel to them. So I spend 95% of my time flying with a TX16S, but even if I take out my Devo 8S, which is a transmitter that I used for years before I got the TX16S, and I take it out every once in a while and fly with it because I don't want it to get lonely. So, but it takes me a couple of minutes to get used to the Devo 8S again after doing all that flying with the TX16S. It just, the sticks feel a little bit different. The transmitter feels a little bit different in my hand. And this one is no different. Plus the fact that it's a different form factor. I mean, it's pretty thin, so it fits differently in your hand. It took me a couple of minutes to get used to it, but after that, I mean, I was flying the plane around pretty well with it. So no worries there. It has like I said, it's halfway in between a toy transmitter and a hobby grade transmitter. I mean, it really, the sticks feel good and they feel smooth, and it's not like the toy transmitters. I mean, you've got nice quality sticks on it and nice quality gimbals, and you have a lot of resolution on the sticks. Not as much as a hobby grade transmitter, but tons more resolution and better quality gimbals than you have with any other toy grade, you know, ready to fly plane that I've seen. And I would say the plane itself is actually a hobby grade plane, you know, with a brushless power system and stuff. It's a very well made plane, and it flies very well. I'm very impressed with it so far. Now, for those of you who have watched my review videos before, you know that I don't do one and done review videos. The only time that I do a one and done review video is when the product, the plane, or the component is just so bad right from the get-go. There's no reason to go any further with it, you know. And I've had a few of those, but they're rare. But otherwise, I don't do a one and done video because I don't think it's fair to you guys. I don't think it's fair to the manufacturer, and I don't think it's fair to the vendor, because I can't give you a conclusion on this plane until I'm comfortable with it. And the more flights I put on it, the harder I'm going to be able to push it, the more likely I am going to be able to see any bad tendencies that this plane may have. So I am going to be putting at least 2 more flight sessions on this plane before I give you a thumbs up or a thumbs down on this plane. So I hope you appreciate that. I mean, I think that's the fair thing to do for everybody concerned. And I don't want to say, oh yeah, this is a great plane. This is the best plane I've flown since the last plane I've flown, and this should be your next plane. You know, I don't do that. That's not what I do. So I want to make sure that if I recommend a product, it's a product, I purchased this myself. Would I purchase it again? Well, I can't tell that after a single flight. Could you? So I want to put a few more flights on it, at least 2 more flight sessions on it, before I give you my conclusion on it. But I can tell you right now, it looks pretty good. Now, I want to ask a favor of you guys. I know some of you won't wait until I've made my conclusion on this plane. Some of you will buy this plane after seeing this single review video, because that's usually what you see, right? You see a single flight video of a review of a plane. So if you do that, do me a favor, and whoever you buy it from, whether you buy it from Hobby Zone where I bought this one, whether you buy it directly from Arrows RC or someplace else, please let Arrows RC and Hobby Zone, since they're here in the US, let them know that you're purchasing this based on my flight review of it, so that they will know, so that maybe Hobby Zone or Arrows RC will see Ground Control RC as a viable place to have their planes reviewed. Maybe they will send me a plane in the future to review. So if you guys purchase this based on my flight testing and my recommendation, please let them know that. You never know. they may decide to send a sample to us later on down the road. So I would appreciate that. So stay tuned. I love what I see so far, but I need more time to evaluate it. So stay tuned, and I will be publishing more flight videos of this, and then I'll give you my conclusion on it. So thanks for watching, and I will see you in the air.